Well, hello! Would you believe it? We have another 2S Whoop. But just before we get into it, a quick reminder to please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell icon which tells you when I'm uploading videos. Anyway, what do we got here? It is from GoFly and it's called the Scorpion 80 and it is a 2S Whoop. It kind of feels like we've got a new one of these coming out every week. The only problem I'd say with the new ones coming out is I'm going to compare them to the Modular 7 because that's been the best Whoop going so far. So it'd be interesting to see how this compares, because otherwise I will just say, get the Modular 7. Not that we don't approach this with a fresh set of eyes, but that's the sort of level that it needs to get to impress us. Anyway, let's have a look what's in the box. Well, straight to it, we get the quad sat there. And this is quite a sort of different design. It feels quite chunky. I'll have to put these on these scales and put them next to something like the Modular. We've got this sort of tough sort of shell. We've got these quite funky looking props, kind of weird shape. And we've got XT30 connectors with this battery, which is a 300 milliamp hour 2S battery, which slots in the sort of tray thing. Now, I've said before I don't like these trays because it limits you to the type of battery you've got. So excitingly, if I look further in here, and there's not much there, there's some instructions, and there's these two other things. Here is the main exciting thing. This is a little battery tray, and what you can do, so we've got these 4 screws just round there. We can take away the little cage and we can put this on instead to give sort of a flat battery, and the other side of the box, what it gives you is a little battery strap so it can thread through there and hold a different battery on. So that's really good and I'm quite happy with that. So what we've got in here, this says it's the FreeSky XM version, although notice we've got 2 receiver antennas. So either the FreeSky XM has changed what it's doing or we've got an XM Plus there. Now, as I can't see a way of binding it without taking the top off, I'll be able to check that in a minute anyway. Other stuff we've got 1103 11,000 kV motors. We've got a 12 amp all-in-one ESC board. We've got an F4 flight controller. It says it runs the F405 firmware, and it says our VTX will go between 25 and 100 milliwatts, and it uses smart audio. All good there. The camera in here is the Cadix Turbo EOS 2. Looks like we can tilt it up and down on this thing, which is all good. And we've got this little, it's come out of the box, all taped down. We've got a little linear dipole here for the VTX. Certainly nothing wrong with it so far. I'm going to open up the top and see exactly what sort of receiver I've got in there, get it bound, and then we'll get it onto Betaflight, see what we need to do with it. Okay, so the question of what we've got under there, pretty easy to resolve. You've just got 4 screws that hold the yellow part in, and when it comes apart, it doesn't really stick on anything, so it's not too bad. And you notice there, looks like an XM Plus. And I'm basing this on the fact that this is an XM receiver. You'll notice it's got 1 antenna and it's smaller. And this is a spare XM Plus receiver, which looks the same. Now I could peel it back and look for the writing, but yeah, it's XM Plus. Now the question is whether it's an XM Plus for everybody. I don't know. It's specified as an XM. I'll attempt to find out if that's the case. Anyway, let's get this bound and I'll put it back together and we can go on to Betaflight, see how it's set up. Okay, so let's plug this thing into Betaflight and see what's set up already. Going to ports, we have got Serial RX on UART 6 and TBS Smart Audio on UART 3. There is a spare port, just in case you want to connect something else. Configuration wise, DShot 600 is running, motor stop is there, which I like. It's an 8K 2K loop. The S-Bus is set up, that's all good. It's pretty minimal actually. OSD is activated, as is anti-gravity dynamic filter. Beeper configuration is there. There's no physical beeper, so we'll have to have a look and see if DShot beeper is set up. Bit tuning looks like something's happened to it. This is Betaflight 353. This doesn't look like the defaults, but I'll be messing with the Super 8. Because they've tuned the RC rate right down for some reason and then pumped the Super rate up. Not fast enough there. Receiver wise, I've got just a little bit of tuning to do on the sub trims. Now one disappointing thing I see here, I've got my radio switched on, and the reason I did that is to see if the XM Plus had the RSI version of firmware flashed it, which it doesn't, else we'd have either aux5 or aux12 going up and down. So although we've got an RSI capable receiver, it's not been flashed. It would be a pain to disconnect it and do it again, and so we miss out on having that, which is a real shame. Let's go to modes. Wow, that's minimal. There is turtle mode set up on aux2, and that's it. Why they felt the need to set just turtle mode up and nothing else? Like, hey, how about ARM? I have no idea. Let's go to OSD. And this is pretty minimal. I think this is what they're going for. It's like minimal modes, minimal amount of stuff on screen. We've got the fly time, the voltage, and the warnings there, and that's it. So let's have a quick peek to see what's set up. So the beacon tone is set, but beacon itself is not set. Now I've gone through this, how this works, in an article on my blog. Feel free to look at it, but we'll have to add that in by doing this, and then it just tells you which one's disabled. Right. Okay, well, I'm going to make my regular changes to that, and then we'll take it out for a fly. Right, so let's take it out for an indoor flight, shall we? And let's get going, see what happens. And instantly I'm thinking, hang on a second, what's with this flickering screen? That wasn't there when I was watching. What on earth is going on? And this has happened to all my footage. I didn't inspect it before I started editing, and here's what it is. There is a FatShark DVR update. There's a problem with what they call the black blinky issue when using rapid fire with PAL cameras. Now, I knew about the upgrade, but when I was testing rapid fire, I used a bunch of PAL cameras and everything was absolutely fine. This is the first camera I've got to display this situation. I didn't even know it was PAL, to be honest. So I thought I'd just ascertain that that was definitely it. So first off, I turned on the rapid fire OSD to tell me what video signal it was, and it is indeed a PAL. And I'm just popped the quadcopter on Papa Dom's cat post, and yep, I've got that strange blinky issue, even though I'm a few feet away, although I've got no antennas on the goggles at this point. So then I went and upgraded the firmware and tried again, and with the upgraded DVR firmware it all seems good. If you're wondering what those screen wobbles and general noise are, it said in the notes that the problem exhibits itself more when there's a lower signal, so I'm walking to the other side of the house with no antennas on the goggle, trying to create some static, trying to get the worst situation, but it seems to hold up okay. Unfortunately, what I didn't have time to do, or the weather window to do, is go out and film everything again. So whenever you see this sort of flicky black screen, that's not there, and it shouldn't be there, so you have to ignore it, and it is pretty annoying. So what I would say is I'll try and keep the DVR footage to a minimum and just talk about what we've got there. So this is the first battery, and as you can see I'm less than 30 seconds in, and you'll notice it's flashing up low battery already with 6.8 volts. This is back to the bad old days when we used to get those really crappy batteries they used to ship with us. Since that time, most of the stuff I've had has been really good batteries. G&B certainly are really nice in these micro quads and the whoops, but this is just some no-name battery, and basically it's crap. You might as well throw it away. This really didn't last more than a minute before I had to land. So let's skip straight over and go to the second battery, where I replaced it with a G&B 300 milliamp hour. So here I am on the G&B battery, and it's obviously a lot better. It's not just losing power instantly. And as far as it goes indoors, it seems to fly quite nicely. I've got a throttle percentage at 60% indoors here, and that seems about right. I upped it a little bit from something like a Modular because I thought it's just a little bit heavier, and see how it did there. And you can see my throttle is higher than normal. So I'm using sort of more of the throttle range than I would normally do. But yeah, it's seeming to go absolutely fine, and really quite nippy, and you can throw it around nicely indoors. The camera, despite what you're seeing here with the obvious blinky bits, actually holds up a really quite nice picture. and just trying Horizon indoors, and it seems like it's got enough power to handle a few little indoor loops and flips without particular problem. And it's really quite nippy in Horizon. Feels a little bit louder than your normal sort of 70-75 mil whoop, so there's a little bit more to it and a little bit more weight. But indoors wise, it coped very well. And out of this battery we got generally between 3 and 4 minutes. So let's turn our attention now to how it handled outdoors. Hello and welcome to this little weird thin patch of grass and stuff we have. Here today to check out the Scorpion 80 outside. Basically to fly up and down here, see how it handles, see if there's any yaw washout in the dive. Test the range as well because it's got an XM Plus in there that should be good. Now there's one issue with the site. Normally I come here because it's slightly protected from the wind. The wind is blowing sort of downwards at the moment and it keeps gusting up, and when it gets stronger, where the trees sort of get thinner there, it sort of squeezes so it gets more intense. So interesting to see how it handles in the wind, because obviously it's got these big ducts which are often a problem. Now what I've done today is I've swapped the cage for this little flat system here, and this is the cage, you can put it back on easy. But yeah, the main reason for swapping it is because I only had 2 suitable batteries on 2S for it, and one of them which it came with is absolutely dire. So what I'm left with is from other quads. I've got a whole bunch of these little 300 milliamp 1Ss, and I've also got this series connector that I should be able to hook up and fly that way, and that wouldn't fit in the cage, so I thought using the little strap is quite useful. I found these little stick-on things in the box which look like little silicone pad things, which should hopefully be fine as well. So let's take it out and give it a fly. So 2 things happened here. First off, I decided to give the original LiPo another go. Secondly, I took off, noticed I was 100% throttle, and realised I was in the wrong rate profile. So I'd set up rate profile number 1 as my indoor flying. So rate profile 2 for outdoor flying would have 100% of the throttle range. So as soon as I activated that, I tried again with the original battery. And really I wish I hadn't, because you can see the battery literally just disappearing to nothing instantly. Really, you know, I gave it a second chance just in case, but it is a pile of crap and will go in the bin, or will be disposed of responsibly, I should say. So next I went out with the G&B 300 milliamp 2-cell once again, and this is actually a high voltage 2S, and I've just charged it to normal LiPo voltage because I don't know the situation with can it handle extra power. And I was just checking to see how it was getting a little bit of range with it, and you know, this should be easy peasy stuff for an XM Plus because it's only like a couple of 100 meters at most. And it's no problem, and surprisingly the quad manages to make it through the quite intense wind without too much of a problem. I mean, you can feel it going slower this direction, but I've got the camera tilt up at a reasonable angle, and it really does give a decent impression of speed when you get down low, something that's captured in the external camera fairly well. So I guess the next question was, how does it handle in acro, and does it have yaw washout? Well, started off doing a split S, and then moving up to a few sort of light acro maneuvers, or a flip there, and then into a couple of rolls, and that all felt pretty good. Yaw washout wise, well, that seemed okay, but I didn't really bring it right out. So yeah, as far as yaw washout was going, I was doing these split S's and I wasn't getting anything bad, but I was also kind of out of battery, so we'll have to go now and try the alternatives. Okay, so let's try the 2 1Ss in series. It's a little bit of a long adapter cable is the only problem there. It's a bit sticky outy. Okay, so I went straight back out to try the yaw washout dive again. And yeah, it feels pretty good. There's no particular problem on that. My problem here was, as you will notice, absolute hopeless LiPo sag on these batteries. I tried a slightly more interesting manoeuvre. I was going for an inverted yaw spin, and what I noticed is the spin went out of line and the quad seemed very happy, not very floaty, so down it went.
Well, it wasn't really a problem apart from those batteries. These are pretty good batteries, but there's obviously a lot more amp required that this quad wants, that these batteries can't produce the same way as they can put into something small like the Modular 7, or something lightweight like the Modular 7. And what I'm noticing is in rolls and flips, this is fine. You start to use the yaw and it kind of goes a little bit out of line, and this is where it gets a bit twitchy, and this is where you feel it's a bit heavier. It's got less float time available. So it's kind of like, yeah, it does well as sort of regular quad, but seems a bit heavy to really throw around in the air. So there's probably a bit more you can do with a bit more stick time, but get a whole bunch of decent batteries to do so.
So if you've reached this part, thanks for sticking with me. Apologies once again for that DVR footage. And just to say again, that wasn't my vision in the goggles. What I saw in the goggles was absolutely fine, no flickering. That's just a issue with the rapid fire and how it worked with the DVR. So that's upgraded and fixed. Now, in normal cases, if I was saying this is something amazing, it must be seen to be believed, etc., etc., if I was going on and on about it, I'd have gone out and reshot it. But I'm not going to say that because it comes in sort of, it's good, but for every good thing about it, there's like a bit of a negative connotation as well. So let's start with some of the good. Some basics. The instructions, little cheap in the box, but what's great about it is it's just simply got every component in the stack. It's labelled, all their connections, so if you ever need to do any work on that, it's easy to do. Fantastic. Bad things. The XM Plus that's in it is great. Should it be an XM Plus? Don't know. I emailed GoFly and they didn't respond, so I can't tell you if I've got an XM Plus by mistake and it should be an XM or it should be there. But either way, why didn't they flash it with the RSSI software? It's a right pain to have to desolder that, reflash it, put it all back in again when it should have been done in the first place. That's just a bit lazy. The included LiPo is beyond awful. Terrible. I mean, this it's amp hungry, and for a battery really needs to stand up. It needs to be a high C rating, it needs to be a decent battery. This wasn't. This was dire. So if you just buy that RTF pack and you get these together, your flights are going to be miserable. So that needs to ditch. On the plus side, they've given you the choice of the cage or the little thing to put on. So you get an option there. That's a really good idea. It doesn't fix people to the battery, and God knows you need to change it from this one. Very nice camera. This little Caddx is getting quite popular on these Whoop style things. It really is a good picture. Indoors shows up very well. Handles the light very well. This thing flies indoors absolutely fine. You can shove it around. You just need to bring the throttle down a little bit, and that's all good. Outside, it can go extremely fast. The price you pay there is these motors. These aren't the normal Whoop motor. These are 1103s, and you saw in the video how quickly it can suck a battery dry. Now, you put a decent high C rating 300 mAh battery in it, and it's going to be okay for 2-3 minutes. Anything else, it's like, I'm going to murder you. And that's because the motors draw a lot of power. It's quite heavy, but it has got some straight line speed. You've got to give it that. It also had the power to come out of those dies properly, and it didn't wash out. Where it did have a problem is when I was going fast and I do a fast yaw maneuver, it went a bit squirrely there, and certainly when I was trying to do any acro move which involves me being able to float upside down for a while, it doesn't have that power to give it a boost and be able to do something. As soon as you've stopped boosting, you're falling again, so you haven't got time to go up and do stuff unless you're really, really high. Normal rolls and flips, that's all fine. That's not a problem. So overall, it's good. It just feels like it's not quite in one camp or the other. It's not a pure indoor flyer, it's not a pure outdoor flyer, and it doesn't get a particularly good mix of the both. It feels like it wants to be like a super outdoors flyer, but as soon as you bring it into like a similar outdoor specialist quad, I mean, this thing will run absolute rings around it. Indoors is good, but it's not outstanding. If you were pure indoors, you'd want a very lightweight 1S. And the reason I'm not too bothered about going back and reshooting stuff is I would still say I think the Modular 7 comes up better for the all-rounder. As a sort of Whoop where you're in close, doing sort of proximity stuff outside, flying around indoors, the lightweightness of this is better than heavier, more powerful motors that this has. This is great for flying fast. It's great. It's got a distance receiver. One would argue, do you need it on a Whoop style? If you wanted to go further, if you wanted to go faster, you probably want a different type of quad. It's trying to do it all, but it's not quite getting there. So I'm saying, as far as 2S Whoop goes, Modular 7 is still king. If you want to do something outside, a pure outdoor micro flyer, I'm holding this up because it's the diatone, but my favourite of the micro quads is still the Baby Hawk R, which is, I think, is fantastic. But yeah, it's good, but I don't think it's the best. So this has been the GoFly Scorpion 80, provided by Banggood. Thanks to them for review. And of course, there's links down below for this one and a few of the others I've mentioned. I hope that review's been helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.